Hi there, my name is Divya, and welcome to my podcast, Sex and the Diversity. Today's topic is harems, aka the rotation, and that's when you're sleeping with and dating multiple people at the same time, rotating them in and out of your life and maintaining multiple connections with different people. You may think that you need to be a Drake type in order to build and maintain a harem, but now thanks to Tinder and other dating apps, even your local office can build a harem. But what if you realized that not only were you in a harem, it was built solely around your race, where you were essentially fetishized? So today I'm actually joined by a very special guest. She is my friend Kavya. We actually were childhood friends and we ended up reconnecting when we discovered we were dating the same guy at the same time and we had no idea about each other. So let me start by telling everyone how I met this guy. Let's call him Richard to protect his privacy. But I ended up matching with Richard through Tinder. I recently re-downloaded the app and he popped up to the top of the match list because he super liked me. And I noticed that he was decent looking. He was professional. So I matched back and he quickly messaged me and we started talking through the app. Then he asked for my number, smooth transition. And so I gave him my number. We texted a little bit and he immediately then asked me out for our first date, which ended up being a lunch date. And so I met him for lunch and I remember the lunch date was not the best date I've been on, but it wasn't the worst. We ended up having pleasant conversation. And after the lunch date, immediately he texted me saying that he had a really nice time and he wanted to take me out again. So I said that'd be great. And we ended up going for a dinner date at the end of the week. So we had the dinner date and we got to know each other a little bit more. I had a good time. And at the end of that, he made out with me and I kissed him back. And that's all that really happened at that date. And then he asked me out again and he wanted to show me his college campus. So I met him in his college town and he walked and gave me a tour and it was a fun day. It was very, low key. We got to know each other a little bit more and he told me about his family and about, we had a little bit of a deeper conversation. And at the end of the day, we ended up getting drinks and then we got dinner. And I remember things started escalating right on that date. He started fingering me inside my car. It was definitely getting a little more risque. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, you're literally fingering me in the middle of of the middle of the street, so many people could walk by and see us right now. So I had to drop him off at the train station for him to catch the train to go back to his apartment. And he then mentioned to me that he thinks the last train left. And so I offered to drive him back to his apartment. And when I did that and I went with him inside his apartment, we ended up having sex that night. And I remember, my memory of the sex, it was good. He definitely was generous in bed. And I also remember that he had trouble coming. He could not orgasm, I tried everything and I usually can make a guy come. So I was just kind of okay. I was a little bit, what's the word? My ego was bruised a little bit because I'm normally good at that. And he said, don't worry. And I just said, okay, fine. And then after that, I remember, after we had sex, I remember the texting slowing down. He definitely seemed a little bit more distant. I thought that was weird. And I initiated with him and I asked, hey, do you want to do something? And he initially agreed, but then he sort of didn't seem enthusiastic and he flaked when we were supposed to actually go out and go on the date. So I just dropped it and let it go. But then I noticed that he circled back and he texted me a couple weeks after asking me to go on a date. And then I started noticing a weird pattern where he would initiate and we would go on a date and have a good time, but then he would disappear for a couple of weeks where there was almost radio silence and he wouldn't initiate, and if I initiated with him, he would kind of give like very half-assed, uninterested responses, which was kind of weird on my end. So Kavya, can you take it away and tell me about your initial experience?
Oh, it's very interesting, Divya, that you said that you guys made a date to go to his college campus because we ended up doing the same thing. So,
oh my God, he repeats the dates too. That's
right?
So funny.
He lied about that as well. So basically, I met him in February 2017 on Tinder.
Okay.
We a few text conversations and we bonded over the fact that we were both math majors in college. And, you know, we had both done teaching. I was a teacher and he had been an assistant professor. And, you know, we were both super into things like history and traveling and, you know, fitness. And so he asked me to meet up at his college campus because he lived an hour from me and ended up taking the train to visit me. So he seemed eager to revisit some of the places where he had spent time as an undergrad. So we had a lot to talk about in terms of like the hangout spots and the history of the town. So we ended up going to for coffee, and then we were bookstore browsing, walking around the campus, and then we ended up getting drinks at this bar after. And we had a really good time. So it felt like conversation was very natural. I had previously dated a lot of non-Indian guys who were interested in learning more about Indian culture. But this was really the first time that I had dated someone who already had so much knowledge of the traditions and the various languages spoken throughout India. So I felt very comfortable talking to him about that stuff.
Oh, FYI, he's not Indian. Just a overview. I don't know if I mentioned that. So he's a non-Indian white guy. So
sorry, little fact. So while talking to him for the first time, I felt like this was someone who I could feel 100% comfortable bringing home to my parents if it ever culminated in a relationship. And someone who could really immerse himself in the culture and go out of his way to find out more about it. So by the end of the date, we were talking about pretty deep things like we were talking about like previous relationships, previous Tinder experiences.
Oh, interesting.
So I asked him what his goals are relationship wise. And he was like, I would like to meet someone for a relationship, you know, and the goal would be to get married. Yeah.
Oh my God. He's saying all the right things.
Yeah. I mean, a huge contrast from what happened later. But anyway, by the end of the night, so he had sat next to me and we were making out and we made plans for a second date. He was like, you should come down to my place. And I just remember feeling like leaving that date with a really good feeling. Like I felt like I had maybe possibly met the one.
Oh, wow. So like it was like fast, like that first date, you just felt like that strong connection.
Right. It was naive, but
I mean, that's what sometimes you click, like some people just like automatically click, you know, I think that's common.
Yeah. Like it felt like conversation like flowed very well and there were no like awkward lulls or anything. And that we had a lot of common ground. So the next time we hung out, which was a week later, I took the train over to his place. We walked back to his apartment. And, you know, after, you know, talking for a few minutes, we pretty quickly, things escalated. We were in his bedroom.
Who escalated it?
He did.
Okay, actually. Of course. So he made the moves.
We were on his couch, like we were making out. And then before I knew it, clothes came off. And one little factoid, like I was a virgin. So, so this was really like I don't want to say kind of like technically my first sexual encounter, but there's a lot of little details with that I have to mention. But here's the thing. So TMI, he couldn't really penetrate me during sex. And I didn't realize until much later that it was because of a skin disorder that I have.
Okay.
But we did other sexual things in the process, you know, and, you know, like oral, anal.
Anal sex? Wait, sorry. Like, okay, I'm just going to cut you. No, I love this. So you were a virgin at this time. The second date, you were letting him fuck you in the ass? That's awesome.
I was pretty adventurous, I guess, for a first time.
No, I was like, did he bring it up? Weird. Or like, were you just like, okay, here we go. Like, might as well just like have sex.
Right. I was like, might as well do everything.
No, I was wondering, did he like suggest it? Or were you like, okay, let's just go with it?
Suggestion, and you know, he didn't pressure me or anything. He was like, we could do whatever you're comfortable doing, but we'll see if it's like a little bit more comfortable from behind. And so we did that. To an extent, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, because that's like usually like, like a 1-year anniversary, like gift or something. So I'm like, whoa, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was very much like, this is kind of like a delicacy. Like people don't do it, but it was, and I had no idea like why. And I didn't realize it was like so much of a taboo and like,
I think it's like I think it's like an open-minded thing. Like I've had anal sex. I think it can be fun. I just like, I'm just thinking like, the first experience, like the first time with the guy, like if I was, it's like something you build towards, like it's just when it's like, bam, anal sex, second date, here we go. Then it's like, what do we go from here? It's just, he's about to have anal sex, like, he'll do what this is like hitting the lottery, right? So, okay. So he had, and then did you guys talk about like the fact that you were a virgin?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I told him like right before I happened, I was like, just so you know, like FYI, I've never done this with anyone before, but I'm willing to, I just want to do whatever you're comfortable doing with, because I know a lot of guys have hangups about, being a virgin's first, right?
Okay.
A lot of people make the assumption that virgins will get attached, right?
Okay. That's interesting you say that, because in a way you were a little attached, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he was, he didn't say this, but like, I think to an extent it might be true in a lot of situations.
Right.
But it wasn't really because of that fact that I was attached, I think. I think it was more of like the connection, like the personal connection.
Right. And you thought like, hey, you're feeling the connection, might as well just go for it. And, did you have expectations? Like,
No, not at all. It was more like it just happened in the spur of the moment. I didn't think too hard about it beforehand. Whereas with like other people, I had been like presented with the opportunity, but I was thinking so hard about it.
Okay, yes. I mean, with anal sex, a lot of people have asked.
It didn't seem natural. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just like, is this like a common question that people ask on dates now? Like, hey, so what date can we now like fuck in the ass? Like, is this like appropriate? So, like, after we meet the parents, before we meet the parents?
I know. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Did he like prep you? Like, did he use lube? Like, was he just like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we did that and you were like, okay, let's just go for it. And then what happened after?
So we were basically bonding, having deep conversations. And I guess I felt more comfortable at that point, discussing like having like unfiltered conversations with him about like anything. And, after like everything was over, he was just like, just so you know, I really like you. I like seeing you. I want to keep seeing you. It takes me a while before I can decide whether I want a relationship with someone. And I'm hoping that I can get there with you. But I also don't want to rush things, because a while back I was seeing this girl and then I met someone else.
So he mentioned it already that, like he's going to be dating other women. He's kind of like setting the groundwork.
He didn't explicitly state that, but yeah, like looking back now, I mean, that's what it meant, basically.
Well, yeah, because he was sort of like saying like, hey, I was dating this girl. I met somebody else. She got pissed, like it's kind of like, oh, I might do that again.
Right, exactly. And I didn't really think too hard about it at the time, but that's really my, being blind to my, as a result of my feelings. And it was our second date. So I kind of was just like, fair enough. Like, should I really be expecting him to want a relationship on the second date? No. But we went out a couple more times after that. So the first of those 2 times I went to visit him in his town. And the week after he visited me. And then I went on an overseas trip for a week with my best friend during our vacation from work. And it was around that time that I like noticed him becoming distant.
How so?
And I was just like, what happened here? Because he had been like texting me consistently. We've been having long conversations. And then it was just like the tables turned. So we were going to hang out like on a Sunday, like right before I left, but then he just canceled on me. Like, so the day before, he was going to a friend's party in New York City. And then he just canceled on me like the day after, giving the excuse that like he went to his friend's party and was too sleep deprived to really function. And the entire time I was in Europe, like I didn't hear from him. So I wasn't sure if he was just not texting me because I was on a trip and he didn't want to like interfere with that, or if because he didn't want to see each other anymore. Yeah. So so pretty much like after about 2 weeks of silence from him, I texted him bringing up the fact that it felt like he was getting distant, and I just wanted an answer as to whether or not he wanted to keep seeing each other.
Okay.
So he wrote me back later that night, apologizing for being distant and telling me that he really likes me, but feared we were moving too fast.
What did he mean by moving too fast?
I think it was about the fact, like, maybe it was the fact that we were like texting a lot and, you know, hanging out more frequently than he thought we should.
How often were you guys hanging out? Like,
not really that much. I mean, just like once a week, considering we were an hour apart. But anyway, he ended up making plans. He ended up texting me to ask if he could visit me that following weekend.
And you guys were using condoms, right? Is that like...
We were, like the first time we were, but like I said, he couldn't really get in all the way.
Okay. So
yeah, my issues down there, but,
okay.
But then like after we stopped,
of course.
I was on birth control. So
okay. And at this time, like, do you think he was like seeing other people? Like what were you feeling like in your gut?
I kind of feared that, that he might have been seeing other people, or he might have met someone at that point, or maybe like an ex came back into his life. But then he ended up making plans with me the following weekend. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of unsure what's going on here. But so he gave me that whole spiel, but then we ended up, you know, things ended up getting physical in my childhood bedroom.
Oh my God. What? Like, were your parents in the house?
They were at home. They were away for the week.
Okay. I was like, oh dang. Like, so he's not like, I mean, I had experiences with him too, where he's like a complete freak. And I thought like, you know, okay, there's no like long-term potential here because, you know, he also like did the same thing. Like I met him, I didn't meet him. I think I met him sometimes. He did have a good personality. So I'm like, maybe there is potential, but he just seemed like very like wishy-washy, flaky. And he would say like weird things. Like, I think I asked him like if he ever been in love before. And he mentioned like some girl when he was like a freshman in college and she just like rejected him. And she thought he was like he was telling a story where like I think he was trying to like, hook up with her and he went down on her and she started like crying. So he thought she was a lesbian, but he still like loved her. And I was like, this is really fucking weird. Like, I don't know. This is just like, it just seems like there's like a lot of like stuff going on, you know, like, I don't know if this is like the only time you've been in love, like, yeah. And then he mentioned that he had like this ex-girlfriend who was 10 years older than him and they were together for like a while. And then she moved to another country and like they still talk. But at that time I thought like, okay, he has an ex-girlfriend that he's kind of like still in contact with, but I wasn't really seeing him consistently. I just noticed that he would sort of like go away and then come back.
And then pop up again, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't like, you know, random things. He would like try to maintain conversations and he would just be like, oh, hey, how are you? And it'd be like long conversations. So it was just, that was kind of like the weirdness that I noticed. And did he do that kind of, like you were saying he would do that with you similarly?
Yeah. So what happened was, so we saw each other that one last time in June of 2017. And so again, we ended up like getting physical in my childhood bedroom. And then after that, he ghosted me pretty much for a month.
Oh, wow. And you would contact him and he just like wouldn't respond?
Well, it's kind of like he just didn't, I mean, I did initiate a conversation, but then he would just give like kind of half-assed responses. Like he wasn't really enthusiastic about talking. And then like just radio silence for about a month, almost a month.
Oh, wow. And at that point, did you call him out for that? Or did you just like...
Yeah. So at that point, so I texted him telling him something to the effect of, well, I haven't heard from you a while, so I'm going to assume that maybe you don't want to go out anymore, which is fine. But I wish you had been upfront with me about it for the sake of not like leaving things up in the air. But there's no hard feelings on my end. Like I had a good time and I wish you well. I was like crying after that conversation because I obviously had feelings for him. But he asked if we could stay friends. He was like, I still like really like you as a person and would like to continue hanging out with you. I just don't know if I see like long-term potential here. And I told him like, I don't think it's a good idea for us to be friends because I have feelings for you. And I didn't really think that hanging out with him would help me to get over those feelings, basically.
Okay.
So we didn't speak for like 6 months after that. And I think that was like during the time when he met you and was also like,
right. And we didn't kind of get like, so like that deep kind of emotional connection. I mean, we talked and we hung out and we went on dates, but we never like discussed, you know, what we were each looking for. I think we were just having like kind of like crazy sex. I was just like, I mean, that was the thing. Like I asked him questions because I did notice this like weird kind of like back and forth. And then in your mind, I think as a woman, you're always like, oh my God, does he think I'm like crazy and clingy and attached because he seemed to like be pulling away. And at that time, it was like dumb of me at that time. You're like, oh, you want to be like cool. You don't want to like rock the boat. So I didn't like say anything, but I just noticed that. But at the same time, you know, like he seemed to just like really like be like pushing, like just the sex thing. Like, and I mean, it was like very experimental. I remember the first time we had sex, he basically was just like, oh my gosh, you're shaped like, you know, the statues outside the temple. Like he traveled to, I guess, Sri Lanka or one of those countries. And he's like, you're literally like shaped like those like temple statue people. And I was like, I don't know if that's a compliment or not. Like, but yeah, then he told me like weird stuff, like how he's only like really like sexually attracted to a South Asian woman, like being a white man. Which I was like, okay, like you're not sexually attracted to any other type people. He's like, no, I predominantly date like and have sex with like South Asian women. And I'm like, huh, like, okay.
Yeah, he told me, like, he didn't mention it, like, in a sexual context, but he mentioned on our first date, he's like, I've only, like, really mostly been out with, like, Asian women, and I don't want to say that I have a fetish, but I kind of do.
I mean, yeah, like, he would just really, I think he was, like, really drawn to that, and I remember, like, he was just, like, really just into the physical body, and when I say, like, he was, like, experimental and freaky, I mean, like, he would, like, suck toes. He was just like he went down on me for so long. He went down on me on my period. Oh yeah, that's like
I know. Right?
He did that to you too. Oh my God.
And he would like lick my asshole, basically. Like he was into like stuff like that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, I feel like he basically does it all. And I was just like, you know, and he never, and then another interesting thing is like, you know, when usually guys too, like they'll want to do all that, but then they'll want like you to like, you know, give them a blowjob or like have them suck your, and like, he didn't seem that like,
he didn't expect it like us to reciprocate.
Really. Right. Like he just seemed to like really just get off on like, you know, enjoying like the woman's body and just like not like want to like have his dick sucked. And I'm like, this is rare. Like usually guys are like forcing their, you know, like their dicks down the back of your throat and like holding your head. Like, you know, like this is, I was just like, huh, like, I mean, I was just like, okay, cool. Like seems empowered. Like I could just basically like lie there. Right. Yeah, but he didn't seem that like into that at all. But he was just like so like open. Like he was definitely like he was licking ass. He was like sucking my toes. He was basically, and he got like pegged too. I never pegged him, but he was like describing that. And he was just like, yeah, I had an ex-girlfriend like basically fucked me in the ass with a dildo. And I was like, okay, like cool. Like he was just basically like sharing and doing all this stuff. And he seemed into it, but he just like, then I guess like, didn't want like a deeper commitment, right?
God, yeah,
I know. Like I guess he like pulls the same moves though, so it just seems to be like a pattern. His moves, yeah. So, anyways, okay. So you were talking, and then did you ever like have any hint that he was like dating other people, or were you? Just...
I had an inkling. I guess I didn't really want to admit it to myself because I liked him, but I did have an inkling.
Okay. And did he like ever talk to you about his like inability to come?
Oh yeah.
So what did he say about that?
Yeah, he was like, so I can't like, fun fact, I can't come inside people. So he would always like get off like on himself, you know.
So when he said he can't come inside, like, was it just like he was not able to come during sex? Like, was he not able to come through oral? Like, what was the
like during sex?
So he would just at the end, like what he would just like finish himself off, right? Like he would just jerk off and okay. And did he ever like think that was strange or?
Did I ever think it was strange?
No, like did you ever think that was strange?
Well, it was my only like experience with him, so I didn't really have much to go off with.
Okay,
so I didn't know how it was to be either way.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I remember that too. Like he just basically wasn't able to come. And even like when we were having like sex, like he would be able to just like fuck for like long time, like 40 minutes and just like not come. And I was just like, okay, okay, like, after a while you can't just like, you're like, okay, just like finish it off. Like you can't like go for like 40 minutes, just not orgasm.
Yeah, he did tell me it was like an insecurity of his though, like during sex that he couldn't come inside people.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, so that was, like, I noticed that was interesting, and, I know he, like, grew up in a kind of, like, a religious, like, household, so maybe that, like...
Right.
And I think that's, yeah.
Right, he said he had, like, no sexual outlet, so I think that's possibly where, like, part of the sexual, like, fetishes come from.
No, I just thought he was like very enthusiastic. Like he hasn't had sex in like a long time. Like he was in the desert and he was like, he's just like, oh my gosh, like the first woman, like I just need to like be with her. And, he just had that like kind of like that intensity kind of thing. Yeah. And like the thing that was interesting is that he would kind of like disappear and then come back and disappear and come back. But it was almost like he was acting like very, like he wasn't in a traditional fuckboy in the sense, like he wasn't like texting like you up, like let's come over at this like midnight or whatever.
Right.
He like wanted to take me out on dates and like he would have like long conversations. I remember when I came to the city to like visit him, he lived like maybe 40 or half an hour away in from Manhattan in one of the boroughs. And he like came to picked me up from Grand Central Station, which is like, far, it's far. You have to take the subway in.
Right. Yeah.
And so he would like do these kind of like thoughtful kind things. And so you think like, oh, this person like cares. But at the same time, at the end of the day, he's like almost like objectifying you in a way. Right. Where, I mean, I don't know, like in some ways, like I felt like really sexy because he seemed like just really into me, like into my body.
Definitely. And that's the thing about guys like that is that they have a way of making you feel wanted and like you're hot pretty much. But
Right. Like I felt like really hot because he was just because he was like such a freak and like so like doing all these things. Yeah. And I remember he also wanted to like, he did try to push like, and I think he was also like really into like, like handcuffs and blindfolds and things like that. Right? Yeah. So very interesting. Okay. So, I'm going to like also, so this was kind of going on like on and off. And, I was just kind of continuing because I'm like, so at this point, oh yeah, sorry. I should have asked you, were you dating other people?
No, so after he and I like stopped dating after those initial 5 dates.
Yes.
Okay, so once we stopped talking, I did go out on a few dates with guys. So here's what happened. So like during that period, we like had stopped talking. I had been on a few dates with other guys, but it didn't work out. And I was in a place where I was just feeling lonely and just missing the way I felt when I was around him. Because none of those other guys were like as attentive, and I could tell they weren't. I mean, it's kind of ironic for me to say this because he wasn't really like fully into me either, but. When he's around you, he's definitely very attentive, doesn't take out his phone, and he's focused about you. Right? But I didn't really get that from like other guys I went out with. So one night in December of that year, December 2017, I ended up just texting him, asking him how he was because I was just like half drunk and feeling lonely. And I didn't expect to get an answer back, but he wrote back pretty quickly. And then we were texting pretty consistently for the next few weeks. And then in January 2018, he asked me to see this exhibit with him at the library near his place that we had talked about in conversation.
Okay.
And, I wasn't going to initiate anything physical given that he was the one who decided he didn't want anything serious with me in 2017.
Right.
But then starting at dinner, he started to get really touchy-feely. So at this point, I'm confused. I'm like, I thought you didn't really want to do anything with me. But anyway, we went back to his place, and before I knew it, like we sat on his couch, he put his arm around me and just started feeling me up. And then before I knew it, we were making out and clothes came off and we were back in the bedroom again.
Oh my God. So it seemed like he had ulterior motives when he was...
Right. And then I told him like, well, I'm kind of confused about your intentions here because, I thought you didn't really want a relationship with me or to keep seeing each other. And he chalked it up to the fact that he thought he was hurting me every time we attempted sex because he couldn't break through, like he couldn't penetrate me.
Get it all the way in.
Right.
Okay. And yeah, because I remember he did have like a big dick.
Yeah, no, definitely. He was definitely big down there, and I'm kind of small down there. So
okay. Yeah, no, he had a big dick. I was just like trying to think of the pros, right? Because he was like really tall, and I remember that. But
he was circumcised.
Yeah, no, was he circumcised? Yeah, he was. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was like really thick too. So I can imagine that it was just hard to like shove it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember he mentioned that somewhat. He was just like, oh man, it's really hard. Like when he like lost his virginity to another South Asian woman. No shock there. No shock there. And then he was just like, yeah, she made me like wait till we were in a relationship to have sex. And then when we did, it was just like really hard to like fuck her because like my giant dick like wouldn't fit. And I was just like, okay, bro, like all guys, like, you know, will say they have a giant dick. Like, I mean, I feel like that's just like when a guy talk like, oh, my giant dick. Like it was so hard to like have sex. Like, oh man, like it's like a third leg. And you're just like, okay, whatever. And then, but then, he did have a big dick. And I remember like, and then that was something that he like then complimented. He's like, oh yeah, you can like really take me all. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But at the same time, you know, I know that, you know, it's just one of those things that like, I guess it can be painful. Like, and I think it's like part of that could be like the emotional intimacy or the connection. Like if he was being on and off and just like, you know, like unreliable, that can also like, you know, kind of be a barrier when you're about to have sex, right?
Right.
Because then you could just, but yeah, So, yeah, he did mention that. And then he also was, so you were like, then he started putting the moves and then you guys like, what ended?
Yeah. So I mentioned that like when I kind of questioned him about what his intentions were here, he was like, you know, he made the point that like, you know, whenever we attempted sex, he was unable to break through and he thought he was like hurting me.
It was almost a little bit manipulative, right? You were made to feel like it was your fault.
Right.
Okay.
Like not enjoy anything we did because of that. But then we just like, anyway, we saw each other periodically, but not too much because like he was kind of, you know, wishy-washy.
Fucking other people. That's how we later found out. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. He just definitely seemed like emotionally unavailable. Is that the term? But at the same time, he would never like disappear. He would like circle back. And which I think that's the weird part, right? Like you would think, okay, if someone's not into me, you know, like bye.
Right.
You wouldn't really talk, but you guys like sort of were in contact. And then after you guys hooked up again, then how often were you guys hooking up after that?
I mean, we saw each other periodically, like maybe once a month, but not too much. But every single time he would initiate something physical. So I felt like led on. And given what happened in 2017, like I was questioning at the back of my mind. I was like, okay, well, is he keeping me around because he likes me and sees potential here, or is he just doing it because, you know,
he needs to get his dick wet, right? Like he just needs to get laid. Yeah.
So I remember staying over his place one weekend in June of 2018. And after that, like I didn't hear from him like pretty much the whole summer. Like we'd both been on respective vacations. But then we got back in touch once I was back, and then we ended up seeing each other a few times in the fall. And during one of those times, like when he was staying over at my place one weekend, the whole sex issue came up again when we were like in bed together, and with him not being able to like break through me. And so we attempted it. He couldn't get in all the way, and I was like visibly stressed. And he was like, I feel like I'm stressing you out. And at that point, I was like, it's not you. Like, I'm just afraid that if I can't do this, I'm going to be disappointing you. And then he was like, no, you're not. I enjoy being with you and I'm not going anywhere. Like, and from that, it was kind of a lead on.
Right. So he basically was just like, it's not just a sexual thing. Like, I'm connecting with you.
So I kind of got led on from that like statement. And it felt like we had gotten closer after that night. We were bonding. We were watching YouTube, Netflix together. We ended up had a lot of candid discussions about our personal insecurities. And it was actually, that weekend was actually the best weekend I had with him. Ended up getting breakfast the next day. And then once December hit, like he didn't really communicate with me much, which felt kind of hurtful after like that great weekend together. So eventually I was like, okay, maybe I should take initiative. Maybe, you know, maybe I should text him. So I ended up texting him to hang out after New Year's, which was, I think, the text that he showed you.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, we'll have to, we'll go back to that. I remember it was like kind of inconsistent, as in I would hear from him for like a month. It would be like, you know, he'd want to talk all the time. He'd initiate. We'd have like long conversations. It wasn't just like surface level conversations. They were like deep conversations. Like he'd want to talk about like his family, his sister, his parents. Like, and he mentioned that he like told his mom about me, like just like things that you're just like, okay, like it seems like there's an emotional connection. I think it's, again, that whole, like, it's just more of that leading on, sort of that intimacy rather than just being sexual. And then we would chat a lot, and then we would go on, you know, and he would like circle back and just be like, hey, do you want to like have dinner or something like that? So we would go on a date. He would plan it. We'd go on the date, and then he'd sort of like drop, like not initiate, not say anything. And then he would just sort of like keep on doing that. But then I go on Facebook and I see that there were like these photos that, you know, obviously now you like you uploaded photos of you like with this guy that I just saw like last week. And like I saw him last week, and then you were like taking like there were pictures of you guys like just hanging around the city. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like what the fuck? Like what's going on? Like I was just like, oh my God, like does he have a girlfriend this entire time? Like I remember I was just like, at first, of course, you feel like kind of like jealous or kind of like possessive.
Yeah, no, it's natural. Like,
because it was like a shock, right? Because I remember he mentioned, and we could talk about, he mentioned about this ex-girlfriend, but he never like sort of said about anybody else. And and then I saw these pictures on Facebook, and I knew you too. So I was like, that's even more of a shock. It's not like some like random ex-girlfriend that he did in college. It's like somebody I knew. And I remember I was like a little bit like afraid to like say something, because I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want, you know, like you to think that I was like being like that, like, you know, trying to be like crazy or like come after you in a aggressive, like angry way. But I was just like, I just wanted to see something, because I'm like, did he have a girlfriend the entire time? Like, was he like, you know, like what was this deal? So I reached out to you, and then we had the conversation.
When I was back on my way back home on the train, like I remember getting the message from you.
Right. No, I know. I just messaged you. I remember because like the last time I saw him too, I asked him, because I was feeling like a little bit like, this is weird that you're dipping in and out. I asked him, I'm like, are you sleeping with other people? Like, are you having sex with other women? And he was like, no. He's like, no, I've gone on dates, and I've like, you know, like, he's like, I haven't done anything sexual. That's literally what he said. And
my God.
Yeah, of course. He said that. He's like, I haven't done anything sexual with anybody else. So I was like, okay, maybe you went on like first dates and he like made out or whatever, but like you didn't like, you're not like fucking anybody else. Cause he was also trying to push without like having sex without a condom.
Right. I can imagine that must have been just like horrifying, just learning that you lied, right?
It was just like kind of like shock, because I think it was the fact that I knew you. Like, I mean, I know I didn't know you like super deeply, but like we still like knew of each other. And it was just like, okay, like, and then like when pictures are up on social media, you think like, okay, they're serious. Like, you know, seems to be like a deep, and you guys like seem to be like having so much fun. You were like going on, like, it was like you were out on an outing. It was just like, it made it seem like very serious. And I'm like, this motherfucker, like he's literally like, he's like, unless you guys are not having sex or you're just like friends. And I was like thinking, I don't know what it was. So that's why I wanted to ask you, like, oh, you know this guy, like, you know, how do you know him?
Well, it's interesting because when I saw him for the first time in like 6 months, I asked him the same question, like, are you seeing other people? And he was like flat out, no.
What? So he's a liar.
Yeah. So he was clearly lying to like everyone involved. So then like after I got the text from you, and of course I'm just like on this train, I'm just like, oh my God, like how could he do this to me? You know, I pretty much don't know him at all as well as I had thought. And, I
mean, he was able to juggle, like, I mean, at least 2 people. And then he he did tell me that he did go on like a vacation with his ex-girlfriend, the one who was like 10 years older than him. And he like ended up, I think, sleeping with her, but it was like out of the country. And he was just like, yeah, we just went on this vacation, but she lives like, she lives in like, I don't know. She lives in like Bangladesh, is like far away. So I was just like, okay, maybe it was just like a one-off thing. But he definitely, yeah, and he's like, he mentioned that, but that was like before we ended up like kind of seeing each other more. This was during a time where we weren't really talking. So I was like, okay, it was like when we weren't talking. But then the fact that I literally saw him one weekend and he's like, then like having sex with you, hanging out with you the next weekend, I was just like, what is this? Like, I'm like, fuck this. Like, what's going on? I was just like, what is the truth? Because I was just like, I want to first talk to her, compare stories, and then like catch this motherfucker, like, and be like, you're exposed.
And what's crazy is like, so he mentioned that he was going to meet up with his like ex-girlfriend in like Turkey or whatever. And of course, like I'm sitting here like panicking, but I didn't want to be like
you don't want to be crazy. Like, you don't want to be like that. I feel like
official, right?
And you know what? It's interesting because he told all these stories like with intimacy, all his fears. And I think he says this to like lower our expectations because it's like, he says this to like keep the expectations low. So like if you then bring this up, then all of a sudden, oh my God, you're the crazy girl. Like you are the one that's attached. Like, let's not rock the boat. And he just like, and I think that's like kind of like the manipulation, right? That like,
and what's is that like he had done physical things with me 2 weeks before he had sex with his ex in Turkey.
What? Like, so he's like going around like, and he's having sex with like, like, sorry. And I don't think, and he doesn't like go and mention it, right? Like he's not forthcoming. He's not like, hey, like, by the way, I'm dating like these other people. I'm having sex with them. Like he's literally like withholding this information.
Right. And that's the same thing as lying, no matter like how he tries to spin it. So after I got the text and we spoke on the phone about like his
stories. Yeah.
Basically, I went home. So I called him on the train. I was like, we need to talk. And he was like, is everything okay? And I'm like, no, not really. And then he was like, I'll call you back because I guess his friend wanted to get like lunch with him. So he ended up calling me back when I went back to my apartment.
Yeah.
And so I confronted him and I was like, are you aware that I know Divya?
I like how you just went straight to it. You're like, did you know that I know this girl? And what did he say?
And he was like, no, I wasn't. And, I told him like, look, I know we're not official, but you really should have told me that you were like sleeping with other people.
Yeah, because at this point, that's 2 other people. Like he's fucking like 3 women, like kind of like in a rotation at this point. It's like me, right. You,
and I'm sure
like, yeah, and this like older women, which I feel like even worse for because like she is like older. I think that she like maybe wants to get married and have like children.
She's holding out for him.
Yes, and I'm like, she wants to get married, she wants to have children, and she's just like pining for him, and like like thousands of miles away. And I'm like, what an asshole, right? Like
no.
Like, I'm like, do you think he told even this like woman? Like, do you think he told her like, hey, by the way, I'm having sex with like these 2 other girls like nearby and meeting?
Right, he probably never mentioned anything.
Of course he wouldn't. And like, so, like she's like in another country, he's having sex like whatever, like wherever and doing whatever. And it's just like that audacity. I was just like, that's just really fucked up. And so, yeah, you talked to him, you called him out, and then how did he respond?
Well, okay, so he basically played the card of, well, we're not in an official relationship, so, like, why would I tell you about the other girls? And I'm not being dishonest by...
you were fucking without condoms. I think you have a right
exactly. Yeah. And it's like, and he pretty much, like, threw everyone else involved under the bus, and he was like, well, I've seen how marriage and relationships restrict people, and I honestly don't know if I believe in marriage. I'm like, well, that's definitely, like, a turnaround from what you told me on our first date. I mean, I get that people...
Wow.
Yeah, like, I get that...
You said that.
Yeah, I get that sometimes people like change their views, but considering I brought up on several occasions with him that like I'm a monogamous person, I'm not really like into hookups, it would have been courteous of him to tell me that instead of assuming I'd be okay with it. And, he told me something else. He was like, I'm pretty sure that if I had asked you to be in a relationship with me, you would have said yes. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, then why did you Why did
wait, he said that? Like, what was he trying to say? Like, what was his intent of saying something like that? It's like, oh, by the way, I know you're so obsessed with me.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you know that you can't reciprocate my feelings, then why didn't you just end it?
Because he wanted to have sex.
Right, exactly.
He was basically like treating us like it was like the harem, right? Like he was trying to maintain multiple relationships with 3 different women, like different. And the interesting thing is like your and my personalities, it's like so different, right? So it's not
right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that was interesting to me. It's like we have different personalities, and so it's like makes me think that this like rotation, this harem is just based on our physical like ethnicity or features, right? It's just
right,
like because we're
I mean, I don't know if we're necessarily like polar opposites. Like I wouldn't say that, but I think, but yeah, it seems like everyone who is involved, like there are differences, like not in a bad way or anything. It's just different personalities, right?
Right. Because you guys connected about like the shared, interests, the shared majors. You were saying that you both taught all these things. And we had, I think even my personality with Richard was different. Like he's definitely like more introverted and I'm more chatty and like extroverted, but we still had things in common. It was just a very interesting, like, it just seemed like, again, like this objectification, right? Like he's just like trying to maintain and juggle like all these women. Okay, so you confronted him and then how did he react? He was just like, I should be able to do what I want, right?
Yeah, he pretty much just like seemed void of any emotion at that point and was like, well, you're entitled to feel the way that you do, but I don't really think I did anything wrong in the situation. Pretty much something to that effect. I don't remember the exact conversation, but and then I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit crazy like that week because I was just so fucked up from what happened. And I was on the phone with him a day after that conversation as well. And I communicated my fears about us. I don't know why I did this because at that point I should have just like dropped him. But I communicated my fears about us not like talking or being friends anymore since I had confided in him about a lot of stuff. And he got all defensive when I told him that. And he was like, I thought you knew me better than that. And he made this long speech convincing me that he would always stay friends with me, citing his friendships with exes as evidence.
When he's sleeping with them, right? They're not really friends.
Right, exactly.
They're like, they're not friends. Like when
he was like, he told me I'm capable of maintaining non-physical relationships with exes.
It's a lie. So that's a lie. I mean, the fact is you guys met on Tinder. You're not on Tinder because you want help with like your math homework. You're not trying to look for friends, right? Like you're trying to like get into some dating situation. And you the fact was that he's basically like having sex with all these people. And so I called him out for it, like after you guys spoke. And I was just like, dude, what the hell? I was more pissed off of the fact because like I was going out on first dates with other people. He wasn't like the only person I was like talking to. I wasn't sleeping with anybody else. Like I wasn't doing that, but like I was definitely like, because I noticed like the red flag. So I'm like, you know what? Like that's his own journey to figure out. But the thing that pissed me off was the whole lying thing. Like,
right.
I asked him like straight point blank, like, are you having sex with other women? Like not to get, I was just like straight up. I was like, are you fucking other people? And he was just like, no. And he said nothing sexual. And then I talked to you and clearly that was a lie. Like you guys were having sex.
Well, here's the thing. Like he probably didn't consider like what he was doing with me to be real sex since he didn't like penetrate me or anything.
But like you guys had anal sex.
But it was a form of, right. Yeah. I mean, it was,
and he was like going down on you. That's like sex.
I guess he doesn't consider that real sex, right?
Yeah, and I remember that, like, it was just like such a technical, because I asked him, he's like, oh, like my dick only went in like 3/4 of the way. I was like, you don't consider that sex. Like that is sex. Like you're not, I mean, you're having sex with somebody, like you're like literally fucking somebody just because it doesn't go in all the way. It doesn't mean
it's like that's your response. Like, I don't know.
Right. And I was just like, and I was just kind of like, this is like messed up. Like, because that made me like just, I was just like, okay, like this is, I kind of like questioned like who this person was. And I was like, and then I talked to you, and then, like I was just thinking about this. I'm like, this is not going anywhere. And then I was thinking about the fact that he has this like, leading on this like older woman who's like sitting, just like under that delusion, like this is going somewhere. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, like this is just really weird. Like he's maintaining a harem, like, he's talking, and it's not just like he's having sex with all these people. Like he's literally like maintaining like simultaneous relationships.
Right. So, all of which are like deep in their own way, right?
Right. And like the thing is, like when we confronted him, like even when, you could ask him, it's like, okay, make a choice, like choose a person to be with. And he was just like, nah, like I'm fine with the way things are.
Right. It's like, no, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like,
right. That's when I dipped. I was like, I don't like, this is stupid. I have better things to do with my time. And I was, speaking of time too, I was just like also shocked because I was like, how can somebody, he had allegedly had like a demanding job. So I'm like,
right.
How the fuck can you manage maintaining conversations, like deep texting conversations with 3 people that we know of, while you have this a full-time job? Like maybe
you should get clothes of yourself, like,
or maybe you should get another job. Like I don't know. Like you clearly have a lot of free time.
Like, it's insane to me. I don't understand how someone could do that.
Right, because like you were mentioning that you were like, because we were having deep conversations, he would like always be like texting back like reasonably, and it's just like, and another interesting thing that I was thinking about is that he's building this harem out of South Asian women, and South Asian women, like generally when they're dating, like I think they are usually like monogamy seeking,
right? Yeah, because it's a culture where that's all about commitment, really. So I don't know why he's expecting this particular like group of people to be okay with just being members of a harem,
Right. But like he obviously the best part of the harem is like they maintain like separate lives, and they don't really know about each other. And then you just have like that like ego boost, or this kind of like, you get that like connection when you want it at your time or whatever. But yeah, it was just like very weird. And I think like the fact that he wasn't forthcoming about that was what he was looking for, that was also like a turn off. And yeah, I just kind of like, I know that whole lying by omission, that is a lie. So
right. I mean, I'll take responsibility for the fact that yes, when I like, in retrospect, I was blatantly being played and I didn't recognize it. And I should have communicated to him like how his behavior made me feel, and how like just disappearing on me like every so often.
You're like a lot more mature and kinder than me. I would just be like, confront him. I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? No.
His behavior at the same time. I mean, it is important to be honest with people about your intentions, for sure.
Right. And I think like, I mean, has this experience just like changed the way that you like date, the way you like look at people?
I'll be honest with you. Like I still have a lot of trust issues because of what happened. So it's like every time I match with someone, on a dating website, I'm just like, okay, do they have an ulterior motive? Or like,
are they building a harem secretly?
Yeah, are they building a harem? Right. Like, so it's like, I'm constantly thinking about that stuff. So it's really hard for me. It is hard for me to trust people, but at the same time, it's like, you can't deny yourself new experiences just because of this one thing that happened to you. In the past, because not all guys are like that. I mean,
of course, not all guys are. But like, what are the red flags that you like looking back on this whole experience? Did you learn from, like you picked up on?
Right. I think, well, definitely for sure. It was like the not being consistent about making plans, like past those like initial weeks that we were dating. So that was definitely a big thing for me. And I also
to being inconsistent, right?
Right. And I also think so I mentioned that like the last time we saw each other, we went to get dinner with his friends, and I don't think he was like 100% honest with them about like what we were doing together. Like he did tell them that we met on Tinder, but like his friend one of his friends that we were with had a crush on him, and he was telling me about it and how like she wanted to stay over his place. when I was there, but he told her no. And that he wasn't into her. But at some point during the night, like she took his arm, and he like, I think if he had been like upfront about the fact that we were like sort of seeing each other, that probably wouldn't have happened. And it was awkward for me a little bit. Like I played it cool and I was cool about it, but, and you know, she was a nice person. I think she just didn't know, like he wasn't really upfront with her about like.
Yeah, he didn't introduce you as somebody who was dating. He just like, kind of, you guys are all hanging out. She tries to put the moves. And then you like, you know, it's just a weird situation. Cause then you're like, are you supposed to say something? Is he supposed to say something?
Yeah, it was really weird because so, his best friend from college like came with his girlfriend, and then there was this other girl who had a crush on him, and me. So at some point, like his best friend and his girlfriend were like holding hands, and then this girl like took his arm. So I'm just like kind of walking behind all of that.
What? It's like on your date.
I mean, he apologized to me about it later and was like, "I'm sorry if that was like awkward for you. Like I don't know what," but.
See, this is the thing that keeps on kind of coming up. Like, he seems like on the surface level, like just, you know, apologetic, kind, you know, like almost caring, but then he just does all this stuff, but then he ends up doing whatever he wants.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's like, you know, just this, almost that surface level kindness, and like the fact is he wanted to keep these boundaries open. He mentioned all these fears of commitment, but in the end, it's because he wanted to like build a harem.
Right. And it's like he tries to present himself as like a typical like nice guy, right? But then he does stuff like this, and it's really, you know, it's really deceitful to everyone involved. But he doesn't really recognize that because he's not defining any of these relationships that he has with people.
Right. And everybody's kind of living far away. And so there were 3 people that we knew of that happened to be in this harem. Do you think there were others?
Okay. So when we got dinner with his friends, so it turned out that the place only took like American Express or something like that. And I was the only one who had American Express with me. So I ended up putting everything on my card, and people were paying me back for what they had. So he ended up like offering to pay me back on like Venmo for his share of the dinner. And so like we were friends on Venmo just because we had like paid each other back I paid him back for like other things at some point. I mean, he usually paid for stuff whenever we're together, but like, I don't feel right about making someone pay all the time.
Right. So I remember that too. And that's another thing I was going to ask, like, how the fuck could he afford to like
treat all these women, right?
Yeah. But like, first of all, how do you have the time when you have this job, and how can you afford this? Like, I remember I also paid for things too. It wasn't like, he wasn't like paying for everything. I like, sometimes he would pay like if we're going to dinner, but the next time I would like pick it up or something.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so maybe that helps out because, you know, like it's splitting the cost. Allows him to like maintain more harems. So that was interesting. Okay, so then you were doing the Venmo thing.
So I remember like I was so mad at him that like I just defriended him from like any social media that I
Wait, what happened? Sorry, like with the Venmo things.
Oh, okay. So here's what happened. So, and this goes back to the Venmo thing as well. So I was like so pissed at him for what he did that I just kind of like defriended him from like everything that we were friends on, LinkedIn, Venmo, whatever. And then he texted me being like, did you like deactivate your Venmo account because they can't pay you back? Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing about this, but, so then like, well, I actually noticed this was one of the things that made me defriend him. I noticed, like right after I had confronted him, that this other girl,
another girl, like is in the mix.
Yeah, that this other girl was like paying him back for stuff on the regular. So there was like a 4th girl involved.
Oh my God! So not only he had 3 women plus this other 4th girl that we don't even, and obviously like that was never even mentioned whatsoever. And then she's there. And I heard this is the new thing, like Venmo stalking or going through somebody's Venmo to see like, you know, is he like paying for other girls. Like, is a man whore, like check his Venmo, you know? That's the best way.
And it was just like showing up on my Venmo feed. And like, it looked like they had been out pretty consistently. And I won't lie, like I looked the girl up to see like, what did you find the truth?
Yeah.
And it turned out she was from the same location that he was living in.
Oh, so she lived in his building.
I don't know if she lived in
the
building,
same
like in the same the same.
Oh, okay, like the same borough or whatever.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. So he has like literally a hoe in every area code. Like he had somebody like outside the city where he was previously living, somebody like international. I mean, this is that all we know of. There could be more.
Right. No, exactly. And, you know, after we had this conversation where he was basically like trying to convince me that he would never like stop being friends with me and that he was always going to like maintain contact. Well, guess what happened? He didn't speak to me for like 2 months, which, you know, and I should have just let it go, but I was still hurt and I was still pissed. So I'll admit that I like sent him a message that I shouldn't have. And I was basically just,
what did you say?
I was basically like pissed that like he had told me that he wanted to stay friends and that he wasn't like making any effort at all to like stay in touch.
But you know that like when he wants friends, they're not like real friends. Like he wants people to like fuck. So
exactly. So that's why I realized it was stupid later on. But at that point I was just like emotionally messed up and and just was acting out on my pain pretty much.
And then what did he say?
And then he was just like, clearly, like, my failure to live up to your expectations is causing you a lot of pain. So I think it's best that we don't communicate.
What? Come on. Oh my God.
He just like cut me off. Fine. Like, if that's what you want, I'll respect, you know, I'll respect your needs. So I didn't talk to him again.
That's so weird.
And it's also a bit manipulative because it's almost like he's not taking any responsibility for his actions.
No, exactly. And I'm just like, well, you're pretty much keeping all these women around. And he was telling me that he didn't think that any of these women like wanted anything like serious with him.
What about that older woman who's like basically not?
I mean, if this girl is like flying all the way to Turkey to have like sex with you, like clearly she probably considers you, you know, serious. Right?
I mean, nobody does that. Like, I mean, I think she could like easily, like if she really wanted to go to Turkey, she could just go to Turkey. Like the fact that she's meeting you, like flying, like you said, thousands of miles.
I wouldn't go to another country for someone who was just like a fuck buddy, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's like a lot of effort for fuck buddies. Like, it's like, come on. Like, yeah, this is not like, it's like the next level. She's going because she's like attached to him and there's like some kind of emotional connection. But in any case, well, it was good to finally uncover that.
It sucks that's how we had to reconnect, but, you know, I think we made the best of the situation.